Imagine the night sky literally streaked with descending fireballs. The silence, completely shattered by the relentless, terrifying wail of air raid sirens. You've got a digital counter in your head just climbing and climbing as dozens of missiles plunge toward a sleeping city. Welcome to today's Explainer. We're zeroing in on a totally pivotal, incredibly dramatic moment from July 2026. A moment where extreme, relentless military pressure forced one of the absolute highest-risk political gambles a nation at war can possibly make.
For 5 solid hours, the sky over Kyiv simply did not go quiet. It was relentless. Overnight, from the 18th into the 19th of July 2026, Russia unleashed what Ukrainian officials called the largest ballistic missile barrage on the capital since the whole conflict began. And just put yourself in the shoes of the citizens down below. It was this terrifying, real-time realization for a capital city that they were actually partially undefended against this overwhelming onslaught.
40. That is the sheer volume of ballistic weapons we're talking about here. Specifically, we're looking at Iskander-M missiles and hypersonic Zircons just arcing down from the very edge of space that night. And look, while Ukraine's Air Force intercepted a lot of them, they just couldn't stop them all. Around 24 of these incredibly fast, devastating weapons actually breached the defenses. It resulted in absolute tragedy, including the loss of 6 lives. But this night wasn't just a localized tragedy, you know? It was the spark that ignited a massive strategic crisis.
Section 1, the interceptor math. Okay, let's dive into this, because this is absolutely crucial.
To really wrap our heads around the political earthquake that followed, we have to look at the stark arithmetic underlying this whole crisis. Because not every incoming threat is equal, right? Slower threats, like your standard cruise missiles and drones, well, they can be intercepted by a variety of cheaper, much more widely available air defense systems. But ballistic missiles, hypersonic Zircons, they travel at just unimaginable speeds. Stopping them requires the highly limited, incredibly expensive American-made Patriot interceptors. And here's the kicker. Every single Patriot fired is one that cannot be easily or quickly replaced.
So, the number you really need to remember here is over 100. In just the first 19 days of July 2026, analysts tracked over 100 ballistic missiles fired at Ukraine. This wasn't random. It highlights a very deliberate, very calculated strategy by the adversary. Fire enough of these high-speed weapons to drain Ukraine's irreplaceable Patriot stockpiles way faster than their allies can possibly refill them. By the time that massive July 18th barrage hit, officials were already sounding the alarm that the shelves were practically bare.
Section 2, a government shaken.
That terrifying arithmetic, that very real fear of an entirely undefended sky, sent immediate shockwaves straight through the halls of power in Kyiv. And the compression of events here is just dizzying. Just days before the massive barrage, on July 15th, President Volodymyr Zelensky initiates the sweeping cabinet reshuffle. He dismisses Defence Minister Mykhailo Fedorov and brings in a new Prime Minister, Syrskyi. Then, protests actually erupt on the 16th. The barrage hits on the 18th, and by the 21st, the top military commander is fired. They changed almost the entire war leadership in just a handful of days.
Officially, that July 15th reshuffle was framed as just routine government renewal, but the public reaction? Striking. On July 16th, citizens actually took to the streets in wartime. Supporters of the ousted Defense Minister Fedorov, a guy who was widely celebrated as this tech-savvy modernizer, they argued he was being unfairly punished even though he was delivering results. But on the flip side, critics countered that after a totally grinding year of war, this kind of leadership churn was absolutely overdue. But whatever side you look at, what was completely undeniable was that the machinery of the state was visibly shaking in public.
Section 3, civil-military friction.
Beneath all that official language of government renewal lay a much deeper, much more dangerous structural crack in the state's civil-military machinery. Multiple accounts revealed these really severe clashes between the civilian Defense Minister Fedorov and the military Commander-in-Chief General Oleksandr Syrskyi. In fact, the reporting stated the tensions were so severe that he and the general only cooperated when the president personally mediated between them. Think about that for a second. In any war, the relationship between the minister supplying the troops and the general commanding them is literally the spine of the entire effort. When that spine fractures, decisions slow down, and trust rapidly erodes.
And naturally, this very public friction had huge consequences. The Kremlin quickly seized on all this turmoil, right? Broadcasting it everywhere as undeniable evidence that Kyiv's leadership was in total disarray.
Meanwhile, domestic critics were warning that airing a massive command feud right at the top of the chain, especially while the capital was under heavy bombardment, just sent the exact wrong signal. A bad signal to the soldiers in the trenches and a bad signal to the Allies providing those crucial weapons.
Section 4. Firing the top general. Now we hit the climax of the timeline.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast between the outgoing and incoming commanders. On July 21st, President Zelensky makes the incredibly high-risk move of dismissing General Syrskyi and replacing him with 43-year-old Major General Mykhailo Drapatyi. Drapatyi is widely viewed as a reformer. Unlike his predecessor, he strongly favors a much faster operational tempo, and he aggressively pushes decision-making power down to the actual frontline commanders. It's a massive, sweeping shift in military philosophy, executed right while the enemy is actively attacking.
Section 5. The logic of purges. So let's just pause for a second and ask a really hard question. Why? Why would a leader risk dismantling their high command mid-war when the enemy is still attacking?
History shows us that these kinds of drastic moves aren't usually made from a position of absolute strength. They're signals of immense strain. Look at the 4 distinct, totally massive pressures stacked on Kyiv that July. First, you have the interceptor MAF closing in, threatening to leave the skies undefended. Second, you have completely stalled diplomacy with no ceasefire in sight. Third, that undeniable, paralyzing command friction we talked about. And finally, accountability. The brutal logic that after a brutally hard year of war, someone at the top just has to answer for it. A darkened strategic picture basically forces these drastic internal changes. When you view it objectively, a really clear historical pattern emerges here. When critical factors like Allied weapon supplies, peace diplomacy, and the sheer volume of enemy fire are completely out of a leader's control, they find themselves in a vacuum of agency. So what do? They pull the one lever they actually still control: the people in charge. Replacing a minister or firing a general is something a president can do immediately to project agency and try to forcefully change the momentum.
Section 6. The ultimate gamble.
Exercising that agency comes with massive, haunting historical echoes and incredible risks, though. Completely turning over the leadership mid-war is the ultimate gamble. Just look at this rapid cycle. In February 2024, the popular commander Valery Zaluzhny was removed and replaced by Syrskyi. Fast forward a mere 18 months to July 2026, and Syrskyi is out, replaced by Drapatyi. That's 2 commanders-in-chief cycled through in a single, grinding phase of the war. There is a fierce, strictly non-partisan debate over this. Supporters frame it as decisive, bold leadership, refusing to just stick with what isn't working. But critics view it as a really dangerous churn that risks critical instability exactly when continuity is needed most.
But here is the undeniable truth. The front line absolutely does not care about the politics of a cabinet reshuffle. The map doesn't care about press conferences. The only thing that matters on the battlefield is reality. Will this new, younger, faster command style under Drapatyi successfully hold the line under maximum pressure? Or will the confusion of a mid-war transition accidentally hand the adversary a critical advantage?
Which leaves us with this final, vital question to ponder. Strip away all the noise, and we see a state making the riskiest choices available, simply because so much else is out of their hands. Will July 2026 be remembered as the masterstroke where Ukraine steadied itself with a new generation of leadership? Or will it be recorded as the moment the immense strain finally showed at the seams? As we watch how the new command adapts, we have to remember one chilling fact. The deadly arithmetic of those dwindling Patriot interceptors against a relentless sky hasn't changed at all.